For more on all this, let's bring in Katie Pavlich. She is editor for townhall.com and a Fox News contributor. Katie, good morning to you. I want to throw up on the screen a tweet from the president just moments ago on all of this. He says this: there will never be an autonomous zone in Washington, D.C. He writes, as long as I'm your president, if they try, they will be met with serious force. So, Katie, we wait for continued reaction from the president. We could hear from him just a moment from now as he departs the White House. But dig into what we saw in Washington last night.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to point out that Washington, D.C. is not just some liberal city in a different state. It is the capital of the United States of America. It belongs to all Americans, and they have the right to visit this city without fear of being caught up in one of these violent riots and protests. Last night, you saw, again, these violent agitators coming in just across the street from the White House, trying to set up their own, quote, autonomous zone, taunting police and trying to take down that statue of Andrew Jackson. Now, the police seem to have acted swiftly in preventing them from doing that, but throughout the night, they continued their violence, as we've been noting this morning during the beginning of the show. They vandalized the church, which was lit on fire about a month ago. Earlier this month, President Trump sent the National Guard back after unrest in the city was quelled, but at this point, it seems like he may need to bring them back. And as you've seen this morning, he is calling on these folks to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And based on what the Department of Justice has been doing over the course of the past 4 weeks, handing down indictments, initiating a number of arrests for rioters in cities like Philadelphia and elsewhere, you should believe that those laws will be enforced for unlawfully tearing down federal statues on federal property.
You're looking at so much different video that came out of last night's protests and out of that new autonomous zone as it springs up there in Washington, D.C. Katie, our own Brian Kilmeade sat down with the president and talked to him about, obviously, what you just mentioned, the attempt to topple the Andrew Jackson statue in D.C. But in the wake of these protests, so many of our historical statues coming down in this country. He asked the president how we can move forward but still remember our history. Here's the president.
You have to understand history, and you have to understand the culture and so many other aspects of our country. And people can study that, and they can hate it, and let's all hate it. But you can't take down George Washington's statue, and half of our country is named after Washington. You can't. We have to remember the heritage, the culture of our country. And, you know, this is less important, but it's very important. Some of the things that they're trying to destroy are magnificent pieces of art.
The Wall Street Journal editorial board also takes this on in a new piece this morning, Katie, writing Teddy Roosevelt gets canceled. It writes this current anti-monument wave degrades what originated as a legitimate grievance, the presence of Confederate monuments. But that idea has been taken over now by what has turned into a mob intent on willy-nilly eradication of chunks of American history. Katie.
Yeah, this has gone, the argument has been made that this was about racial equality, but this has been hijacked and gone far beyond that and turned into an anti-American mob that is insistent on erasing parts of American history that are good. You don't protest and vandalize the Lincoln Memorial where Martin Luther King Jr. gave his I Have a Dream speech if you're interested in racial equality. You don't tear down the Teddy Roosevelt monument in New York City, who was the man who first invited the first black man to the White House to dine with him, Booker T. Washington, who went on to be his close advisor. In fact, Booker T. Washington was one of the first people that Teddy Roosevelt contacted when he was elected to have him dine with him at the White House with his wife and daughter. You don't tear down the statue or go after those who fought for the Union against the Confederacy for the future of a better country and away from slavery. And so this is a movement that is very well organized. I think Tucker Carlson put it well last night when he says it's a political movement that is very well funded and organized and has goals of not just not equality or moving forward as a country, but rather tearing down our country from the inside out. And you saw this at the beginning of these riots about a month ago when you saw this violence start, and you're seeing it increasingly now as these autonomous zones keep popping up. And I know that there might be some controversy over the president saying that these people will be met with force. Well, as we've seen in places like Seattle, these autonomous zones have become very violent, and their victims are black victims. So again, this is not about equality. This is about destroying American history, whether it's the good parts or the bad, and erasing it so people don't understand it.
Well, it looks like Seattle's CHOP zone may be coming to an end. If you look at the recent comments from the mayor of that city, who had suggested we could see a summer of love, but now 3 shootings in that zone, one of them deadly. We're going to continue to follow all of it that is happening across the country. Katie, thank you. Great to talk to you this morning.